Hi, everyone, and welcome to your final lecture for technical writing. I can never believe how quickly these summer semesters go by, but I hope it's been a really good and really engaging one for you. I wanted to start by apologizing for being a little bit behind on grading last week, and I actually had to use some old lecture videos as well. The reason why was my own doctoral dissertation was due last week, so I had to turn in this couple hundred-page document with very special formatting and everything else, and it took a lot more time than I thought it was going to. And I think I was a little bit behind on grading and things like that. So I just wanted to apologize. But I was reading everything you were putting on the Canvas page, and everything looks really great. And actually, while I'm recording this video right now, I'm kind of halfway through the authentic authorship exercise, and it's always really great to see lots of different stories there. Part of the point of that assignment, as well as the spatial orientations assignment, is just to show you and all of your classmates, that we all have different relationships with big topics. Those topics can be our own college experience. Those topics can be more concrete, like the actual physical campus. And when you're doing technical writing, especially beyond this course, because now we're wrapping up. That's always something to keep in mind. People always have many different definitions of various terms, of even places that seem concrete and always the same to everybody. People always have different interpretations and different ways of understanding those things. So those are the points of those assignments. In the reflections, I saw that a lot of people seem to really get it. So yeah, great work there and keep it up. Our last lecture today is going to cover, I'll bring up my screen here. It's going to cover artificial intelligence and technical writing. Now, in many of your other classes, you might hear about how artificial intelligence is this terrible thing that, always makes mistakes and students can use it to plagiarize and cheat and so on. But I don't think exactly that same way. I think artificial intelligence has a lot of good implications for technical writing and how we can use some of the techniques and strategies we've talked about in this course. And so what I wanted to do to illustrate that point to you is just show you a slideshow that really covers some of my most recent research, including the research that went into that dissertation I just mentioned. And the reason I want to show you that is to show you how generative artificial intelligence can be a really positive tool for technical writers, especially as we think about the rhetorical situation and our audience and users, and kind of all those different facets we talked about throughout this course so far. So today I'll talk about artificial intelligence generated personas and a technical writing. And so I kind of slowed down the title because there's three big topics there. We have generative artificial intelligence, we have personas, and we have technical writing. So I'm going to break each one down for you just to kind of come back and show you the way that I'm using ChatGPT these days. So first big term there is generative artificial intelligence. I think it's a really important distinction to make because, yeah, like I said, in other classroom conversations, you might just hear, "Oh, artificial intelligence is, ruining things," or "Artificial intelligence is, making it easy to just plagiarize a paper." And what I don't think that captures is the breadth of artificial intelligence systems out there, because there are AI systems that are used in healthcare, for example, that compile tons of data that could never be done by hand and help patients, achieve better outcomes. So there are a ton of artificial intelligence kinds of systems out there, and the one that I think gets the most, I guess, the most hate in academia would be generative artificial intelligence. So this isn't really your textbook definition, but I just kind of simplified it. Generative artificial intelligence refers to AI that creates, and it can create words, it can create images, and it can create videos, and so on. And so I'm talking about today this very specific generative artificial intelligence within AI. The tools you might be familiar with, like Copilot or ChatGPT. There's video ones like Synthesia that, yeah, make images and sound. So, that's the artificial intelligence I'm talking about, and it's really the only artificial intelligence I know very much about. I don't know much about those other systems in healthcare and in advanced sciences and so on, but I do know a little bit about generative AI. One of the terms I wanted to introduce you to was the large language model. You might hear this term get thrown around a little bit when generative AI comes up, especially ChatGPT. The large language model is basically just the model's pool of linguistic data. When you've heard out there maybe that people feel like generative AI or ChatGPT steals other people's words. The truth is that that's kind of true because it's trained on books that are out there, on websites that are out there, yeah, pretty much any written data you can think of or corpus that gets put on the internet. That can be included in a large language model. Now, this is also the first place where people start to talk about bias with generative artificial intelligence. So you'll hear people say like, oh, it only kind of knows one point of view or one perspective. It doesn't consider diverse audiences the way that technical writing, for example, does or technical writers do. And that's kind of true, right? If the large language model is trained primarily on a website like Reddit, for example, we might expect it to sound mostly like white 15 to 40-year-old men who are kind of having the same arguments over and over. And then that's going to be what it thinks is human language. And so that's where those biases and things start to come in. I believe with most generative artificial intelligence systems like ChatGPT, the LLM is usually proprietary rather, so it's not like we all have access to it and can inspect where it's getting its data from. But we do know that it does have one because it must be pulling from some pool of linguistic data. Other vocabulary to think about are inputs and outputs, or what we might just call prompts and responses. So if you've ever used Copilot or any of the popular generative AI systems, you know that you have to type something into a dialog box. And then what the system does is it brings you back a response. And it does that um, basically by reading your input, but because it's a computer, it's more like it has to decode what you said and kind of figure out how it works in terms of its own systematic programming. And then it has to make a ton of inferences in terms of figuring out what the next word is that you might want or what the next paragraph is that you might want. And that's kind of how this whole conversation with generative AI systems go, as it goes back to its large language model, figures out what it was you were asking, and then comes back and guesses what it is you want to receive in return. There's a process also called scrubbing. This is supposed to remove, I put extra stuff, again, not really your textbook definition, but when it comes back to you, usually it scrubs private data, like if it came from someone's personal blog or personal page, it won't always give credit to that person. Sometimes that's bad because it's plagiarism. Sometimes it's good because it protects privacy. It's supposed to remove bias, but again, that depends on its own coding and things like that as well. And so the scrub happens, and that's sort of that's kind of a good picture without using too many technical terms of what's happening in a conversation with a generative AI chatbot. Here are some other cool terms I've heard in terms of artificial intelligence that maybe you haven't come across yet. But one way that people are talking about using generative artificial intelligence is approaching it with expert caution. So again, not really a textbook definition, but I simplified it. And basically what that means is that when I approach generative AI, I bring my real life expertise to it and want to work alongside the artificial intelligence system rather than going to the generative AI and saying, hey, I have no expertise, please make it seem like I do. Because what can happen then is if the generative AI is wrong, or ChatGPT brings you back the wrong response, then since you don't have the real life expertise, you might not see where it's wrong or where you have to kind of fill in information and change things. And that brings me to another phrase, human AI collaboration. This I think is really important. But basically imagining workflows that enable real humans to supply feedback and edit generative AI's output for mutual benefit. So basically, real humans can still do work, can still write and edit and change things. And then that can also at the same time train generative AI's model to create better, more human or realistic responses. So those are just some phrases I wanted you to know and to give you kind of a picture of generative AI, the way it kind of exists in my mind. Then the other phrase from the title was personas. So we have generative AI, and now we have personas. And I'll get back to my research here. But basically, personas are or can be part of the rhetorical situation. And here actually is a textbook definition. This is a book called "The Inmates Are Running the Asylum" by a guy named Alan Cooper. Um, in designing interfaces like websites and so on, he writes that our most effective tool is profoundly simple. Develop a precise description of our user and what he wishes to accomplish. We make up pretend users and design for them. And so these pretend users, Alan Cooper and his team called personas. Now, what you might be picturing in your mind is kind of just a list of facts about somebody or a list of information about a potential user. And that's actually pretty much correct. I'll dig a little bit deeper here in just a second. But basically, what Cooper and his team thought was that if I have, a picture of one user or just some information about maybe a handful of users, let's say three or five, then I can picture those people as my audience a lot more effectively than just thinking about like a general wide demographic piece of information. So, like you heard me talk about Reddit earlier, and I said something like, the user of that website's like a 15 to 40-year-old male, white male who might talk in a particular way. Well, Cooper and his team say, that's a huge amount of people still to design for. And it's very tough to actually logically picture a big audience like that in your head. But they said, what if we just pick like one or two people? So let's say they decided Professor Repetto is one of those people. So they would put a picture of me or someone who looks like me up on the board, and they would write some information about me, and they'd say, okay, we're designing just for him. And so that makes it a little bit easier because you have like a particular audience member in mind rather than just like a big picture of a bunch of people. And so I'll save you a big literature review, but basically many people agreed with Cooper and started designing personas for themselves and for their own different types of designs. And so over time, the field came to kind of establish some best practices about, what should be and shouldn't be included in our personas, though of course it's always up for debate. But here's a list I kind of distilled. I said effective personas might include a real first and last name. So the reason that's important is they don't want you to just put up like let's say we have a generic guy named Dave. They think that's not good enough because it's still too generic. It's still like too big of a category. But again, if we say Dave and give him a last name like Smith, then they say, okay, I have like a real Dave Smith maybe in my mind, and I can actually start to picture working with him or designing for him. He should have demographic information. You heard me talk about age. Race is another one. Can be, income. There's lots of different demographics you can include. A list of goals the persona rather wants to reach with or beyond the design. So, like I said, for them, they were designing websites. The biggest design that I do every semester is a syllabus. And so, if I were designing personas to write syllabi, I would want to know what is the student what do I want to accomplish within my course or with the syllabus, and then beyond my course and beyond the syllabus. So, those would be two things that I might put in a persona who I'm potentially designing for. Um, Another really important one is the challenges they have reaching those goals. If you don't know your users' challenges, um, sometimes it can be tough to design for them because you don't know, what's gonna slow them down or what's gonna present a real barrier to access for them. A narrative covering when they might use the design. So again, if you're thinking in terms of website, you can say, hey, this person logs onto my website just after 5 p.m. after a long day of work. And so now I know I'm designing for somebody in that headspace rather than just kind of a generic person. And a realistic image of the persona in a place they might look at the syllabus I wrote for myself. And I'll transition to that in a second. But for me, when I'm designing syllabi, If I had a persona, I might, have a picture of a student in the library looking at a syllabus, or at a coffee shop, or in their dorm room, something like that, that just gives me a picture of when the person is actually using my design. So here's where these things come together, and I'll take a second before I go to my prompt. But basically, in the past, if you wanted to discover these things or brainstorm these things about an audience, you either A, had to actually go and research that audience, and so you would have to take a ton of time, usually a ton of money, and go interact with all the people you think might interact with your design or with your piece of communication, and figure out what they want and what their challenges are and what their typical demographic tends to be. Now, that's, like I said, a really time consuming and really long process. You might end up spending 3 or 6 months doing that before you even start your design, which, puts you back maybe a full year in terms of deployment for something. The other way you could do it is based on assumptions. So you could just sit back and think, what do I assume about my user? What might their demographics be? Now, as we know, assumptions are a good place where bias can enter. And we talked about that a little bit with the social justice turn. And so we never want to be just relying on our own assumptions within a design process. And so what I'm doing in my research is thinking, well, can we actually leverage the large language model that generative artificial intelligence has, and think that, assume perhaps that that's done some of the user research for us, and we can figure out things by interacting with generative AI. And so here's my prompt. It's kind of long. I guess I'll read it out for you, and maybe walk through why I prompted ChatGPT in this way. But basically, I said hello, and then I defined who I am. I'm a technical communication researcher interested in improving syllabi generally, but I want to start with a technical communication syllabi in particular. That's kind of that expert caution, right? Like, I know a good amount about technical communication, but not maybe a whole ton about everybody else's syllabi, whether it's in chemistry or the health sciences or something like that. I'm kind of sticking to my own expertise to get started. And then I said I would like you to generate 6 student personas that technical communication instructors can reference while creating their own syllabi. And then I gave them the list here that I just gave you. So after my research, I found out these are kind of the most important things. And I also want an image of each persona where they might do their schoolwork. So, like I said, that was that last part of the previous slide, just kind of breaking down specifically what I want, and yeah, waiting for my output. So, again, specifically who I am, specifically who I want. I bring in my own expertise, which is, important to think about, because then I know I'm thinking about, I'm looking at outputs that I can already kind of relate to or discern. And so lastly, I'll just show you the output it came up with. So this is somebody it says I should be designing for. I've got the name Tyler Brooks. He's 20 years old, Caucasian, sophomore in general studies, undecided. He likes gaming and socializing more than schoolwork, as you might be able to see. Maybe up late gaming, or maybe drinking, or hopefully those maybe are energy drinks, but maybe hopefully not. And Yeah, it turns out that this student is one who's not particularly motivated, right? Pass the class with minimal effort, complete assignments without stress, avoid public speaking or group heavy work. Um, and yeah, we can kind of keep going through these things. But yeah, so I have my goals beyond the course goals, wants to find a career path, have a fun and social college experience. Some of the challenges with motivation and procrastination: he likes doing other things other than doing the work and doesn't have very good time management skills. Um, Here's a narrative. Like I said, when would he use it? He often checks it last minute to see if there's anything urgent he forgot rather. I gave him a memorable quote, which is, "I just need the bare minimum to pass. I don't want to dig through everything." And then yeah, he put in some most important syllabus sections, and some thinking about attendance policy and extra credit. So yeah, so this is the persona that I created, and I just wanted to share this to you because I find this to be a much more useful deployment of generative AI than telling it like, "Hey, just create my syllabus for me," because this informs me that, hey, this might be one student you'll encounter. Now, like I said, I know it's not all of you, and that's why if you go back to this one, I put 6 student personas. Oops. It's moving that around, but six student personas here. And the reason I put that is because I actually have many other ones. And what I'll do is I'll put them up on Canvas for you to see. But basically, what I really wanted to demonstrate by showing you that persona and how I'm using generative artificial intelligence is that, yeah, it's so much more useful beyond just saying, hey, write my syllabus for me. Like you saw in the rhetorical situation, generative AI can help you think about the environment that your audience might encounter your document in. It can help you think about the context in which you're sending it, both historically and socially. It can help you think about the demographics of who might be reading your design and why. And so, what I'll ask you to do in your assignment this week is well, I'll give you a couple options. One will be to kind of think about um, one concept from this course and how you might use AI creatively to address it. If you're not comfortable using generative AI systems, I'll give you an option B, and maybe we'll return to the music assignment and think about what kind of music our entire group likes. Then in the discussion, what I'll do is I'll put the other personas that ChatGPT came up with for my students, and I'll ask you maybe if you feel fairly represented by one or a couple of them, because I don't think Tyler was the student I was in undergrad, but I think I lived with a couple Tylers throughout my time, so maybe there was a an actual representation there. But anyway, that's going to kind of conclude the content for our course, other than what you put on Canvas. And of course, you'll keep getting comments from me and grades from me, on your on everything you've submitted with comments. So I'm still here if you need anything. Our course runs through the end of next week, which I think is Sunday, July 12th, if I'm right. But I need everything in this week by Friday because we have to get our grades in a lot quicker. So you'll just have one assignment, two discussions. And yeah, thanks so much for all your effort. I really appreciated this group. And again, I apologize. In week four, I had another project I had to really turn some attention to. So I'm sorry I wasn't as on top of things as typical. And yeah, just as a last note, we've talked on Canvas uh, about defining technical writing and what it is. And actually, maybe we'll do that as a second assignment. So you'll have two assignments, two discussions. But Yeah, we've talked about how it's beyond just pure scientific writing and report writing and some of the things that we can kind of picture as pretty dull to read. But what I just wanted to remind you was in this 5 week course, I really packed a lot in. We did instructional design, we wrote job postings, reflected on ourselves, thought about tech writing in a cultural way, and mostly the assignments were really small. But the lessons that are embedded in those small assignments are still applicable to the longer documents you'll have to write, whether you continue in academia, whether you go into industry and have to write different kinds of reports or even emails and things like that. This idea of anticipating the audience's needs, writing something that's useful and usable for that audience. Those lessons apply across documents and across genres. So just keep that in mind as you wrap up. And yeah, I'll look forward to reading everyone's final submissions. And yeah, I just appreciate everything. Thanks, everyone. Bye.